Hello and welcome to the ID Talk podcast. My name is Peter Counter and I am the editor-in-chief of FindBiometrics and Mobile ID World. November is Face Biometrics Month at FindBiometrics, a 4-week event in which we are delving into the history, the technology, the promise, and the controversy around facial recognition in identification and authentication scenarios. On this episode, we welcome Paravision to ID Talk. Formerly Ever AI, Paravision provides advanced computer vision technology to empower a wide range of mission-critical applications. Susan Stover, our Vice President of Digital Content, sat down for an in-depth conversation with Paravision CEO Doug Aley and the company's newly appointed Chief Product Officer Joey Pritikin. Their conversation begins with an introduction to Paravision, going on to talk in detail about how AI and deep learning technologies have affected face biometrics as a whole. After touching on liveness detection and the contactless biometrics experience, Stover, Aley, and Pritikin delve into the current controversy around some public-facing deployments of facial recognition and offer guidance for an industry currently tasked with walking some delicate ethical lines. So now, with no further ado, I present Susan Stover speaking to Paravision's Doug Aley and Joey Pritikin.
Today, I'm joined by Doug Aley, CEO, and Joey Pritikin, CPO of Paravision. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having us, Susan. We really appreciate it.
Hey, Susan.
And this, by the way, I'm Doug Aley,
and I'm Joey Pritikin.
Apparently, our voices are very similar, so we'll do our best to distinguish them during the podcast.
You should blame Doug for anything that's said improperly.
Yeah, fair enough.
So let's dive right in terms of introducing Paravision. What are your respective backgrounds in biometrics, and how have they informed your unique approach to facial recognition technology?
I'll start here. This is Doug, because mine's actually rather short between the two of us. So I actually have largely sort of an outsider's perspective. So I've spent most of my career in the sort of business to consumer space at brands like Amazon and Zulily and Minted, and came to Paravision with that sort of perspective. So, but the idea is that face recognition and computer vision can help enhance personalization and improve customer experiences are kind of near and dear to my heart from that background. And then the other, I guess, semi-relevant experience is that I was on the executive team of Jot Networks about a decade ago, which was a voice recognition company that we sold to Nuance Communications that was focused on voice recognition to enhance productivity. So, but Joey's got a much more interesting background here.
I don't think it's more interesting, but it's more of an insider background. Yeah.
You're relatively new to Paravision.
Yeah, very new. What are you?
Yeah,
how old are you?
I think I'm 2 weeks and a day or something like that. But it's awesome to be here. I've been in biometrics and identity my whole career, so about 18 years. And the neat thing is I've been able to see an evolution from a fingerprint-centric market to one that was exploring iris to one that's really seeing face take off. And honestly, it's remarkable what's happened over the last 5 years in particular with AI and deep learning specific to face recognition, which is one of the things that really got me excited about coming here. What I'm seeing is that we're able to deliver outstanding accuracy, throughput, and user experience. And the combination of those and the price performance of those driven by face recognition is allowing us to open up new markets and applications, things we've talked about for a long time, but ones that are finally becoming viable. You know, for a long time, fingerprint was leader, as I mentioned, and it's accurate and it's convenient, but it's touch-based. And so it's prone to a lot of challenges because of that. On the other side, we've got iris, which is super accurate, very stable, and resistant to spoofing and so forth. But it requires specialized hardware, in many cases, specialized databases that doesn't really map to what customers are looking for. So face recognition really seems to hit a sweet spot as we've seen the market evolve over the last couple of decades.
So compared to when you started in the industry, what are the biggest differences in terms of the public perception of face biometrics?
This is Doug. I'll start from the last 2 years perspective, and then Joey can probably give us a more kind of global perspective over 18 years. But we're seeing both partners and end users forming a sort of a more sophisticated perspective or approach in terms of the benefits and risks with face recognition. So, obviously, I think it's a watershed point for the industry was when Face ID was launched on the iPhone, and you've got sort of hyper focused user experiences like that where customers feel like it's just become a natural part of what they do on a day-to-day basis. And you sort of contrast that with some of the mainstream media's focus on not the best uses for face recognition, and including some of the perspectives on how China is implementing that in a sort of surveillance type environment. So, I think we're still very, very early days here still. And we're seeing it evolve to what we think is a more balanced view of how to use the technology here in the West. But I think Joey's seen a much bigger evolution over the course of 18 years.
Well, it's cool to see the nuance over the last couple of years, right? And so we're talking about things like how do we balance privacy, how do we balance security, usability, and all these different things. But it's easy to forget that there's been a pretty radical transformation over the last couple of decades. So biometrics not that long ago was something that was sort of a curiosity. And then through various means, whether it be government services on one side or things like Touch ID on the other, it became something that people accepted. And then it started to become something that people expected in terms of making user experiences better, to make their lives easier. And so, like I mentioned before, because of how good face recognition has gotten, it's opened up all of these new applications that were just conceptual previously. And so there's the challenges and the opportunities, as Doug mentioned. There's positive awareness. There's people that are having terrific experiences, whether it be with consumer mobile devices or, for instance, in travel, air travel, cruise ships, things like that. But there's also rightfully concern from the public. What's happening with my data? How's it being used? Where are the environments where it's appropriate to use this kind of technology, and what are the reasonable limits for that? So it's pretty neat to see it all evolving.
Absolutely. Well, the talk I gave at Money 2020 was focused on UIX, focused biometrics, and talking about how financial services was actually one of the first place where the evolution of digital identity and the adoption of biometrics happened. So it's really interesting to see how it's grown from there, expecting that high level of security and convenience that comes with various modalities and face biometrics in particular. So how does Paravision fit within the increasingly expansive face biometrics landscape?
I think probably the sort of the best thing to know about Paravision is that we're exclusively an ingredient provider. So we serve OEMs and other people that have engineering teams that are looking to integrate face recognition and other computer vision into their end products, and we serve as an advisor as well as a technology provider in that capacity, as we've seen a lot of pretty complicated implementations here. So our goal is primarily to help end solution providers deliver high performance face recognition to their end users across a pretty broad range of applications, and to make sure that those algorithms are performant not only on the sort of large GPU cluster scale of things, but also all the way out to the edge. And that was actually one of the reasons why we're so excited to bring Joey aboard, as he's got a lot of experience with those edge platforms, and is sort of a hugely valuable asset to the team.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be one of the things that helps this market proliferate, both in terms of the user experience and also how you manage privacy and security. I think one of the things that I mentioned from my side is that in addition to being a strong ingredient provider, as Doug mentioned, we think there's a gap in the market in terms of trusted companies that deliver high performance face recognition. This market has been largely dominated by international players who may not be the right fit for high sensitivity applications, customer focused applications, or otherwise. We're a US company. All of our technology is developed in North America, and this offers pretty huge value. So, on one side, we're a trusted partner, but we're also a strong partner. We can be dynamic and responsive in terms of product needs, technical support, even business model. We really pride ourselves on being Silicon Valley's approach to this and a strong US provider of this capability.
This episode of the ID Talk podcast is sponsored by Paravision. Paravision's algorithms excel across a range of challenging scenarios, including cooperative and non-cooperative faces, light and angle variability, blur and pixelation, occlusions, and diversity across phenotype, age, and gender. As a result, Paravision is one of 3 companies globally and the only US-based company to rank in the top 10 in 50 accuracy benchmarks across NIST's one-to-one and one-to-many face recognition vendor tests, the US government's independent evaluation of face recognition algorithms. Learn more about Paravision's higher standard for face recognition by visiting paravision.ai. And now, back to the show.
Speaking about the specific technology, AI and deep learning have taken face recognition specifically by storm. Can you talk a bit about how Paravision has leveraged these technology breakthroughs?
Yeah, sure. I mean, maybe Joey can talk a little bit, because we've talked at length actually about some of the infrastructure we put in place on the research side here that we've been doing from the very beginning of the company. But I think when it comes down to it, being able to implement research with a data set that is diverse, and balanced and clean. So we not only have to worry about the technology breakthroughs, but how we take advantage of those through sort of the curation of that data set. And so, at the end of the day, our customers get the benefit of the models that have used that data and the breakthroughs, both that we make here internally and the sort of the secondary research that we consume. And again, I think that's one of the reasons why sort of Joey came aboard on, and maybe you can talk, Joey, about about sort of what you've noticed in your first couple of weeks on the ground here.
Well, I mean, I think the thing that I've been, I guess, most surprised by and pleasantly surprised by is what an efficient computer vision and machine learning organization looks like. How to create infrastructure that's able to rapidly turn models. On one side, as Doug mentioned, the data set here is outstanding and driven toward inclusion in particular, so that we have a diverse and robust data set. But what's really neat is to see how quickly we can turn some of the latest research. AI, deep learning, DNN, CNN, and so forth are really still in their infancy. And so there's dramatic new research coming out on a real-time basis. And so we've created a really awesome infrastructure to rapidly test and integrate the latest research, both primary research from the company as well as secondary research. And like a few interesting examples that I've seen in our latest submission to NIST for FRBT, I think, which goes in the next few days or has just recently been submitted. We're actually including capabilities that were only published in academic research less than a quarter ago. So within we had taken that research, integrated into our models, confirmed substantial improvements in performance, and then it's now making its way to production. As you may know, all of the models we submit to FRBT are production models, and we pride ourselves on that as opposed to having academic models. We test as we fly. Another even more extreme example, just last week, a few of our engineers were at the International Conference on Computer Vision. They saw some really neat stuff and have already, Doug was just saying this to me, I can't hardly believe it, I've already built it into our models and are testing it and seeing improvements.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I mean, we test thousands of models every month to look for improvements. And so, but what was great is that I think 3 of the papers that were produced there were interesting enough for our researchers to, when we try to cull the research first, as soon as the papers come out, they do a deep dive on the paper, say, well, we think this is interesting or not interesting relative to the work that we're doing here. And they have the capacity and the capability to sort of immediately dive into sort of creating models around that. And that's made easier by the infrastructure that our CTO, Charlie Rice, and the backend engineering team led by Pierre Massat have put together. So yeah, I can't speak highly enough about both the deep learning team and the backend engineering team and the work that they've done to for a small company like ours to stay at the top of these pretty important independent rankings.
Something I want to talk about is recently high-profile presentation attacks against consumer-grade smartphone biometrics have placed this spotlight on the importance of anti-spoofing and liveness detection. How does Paravision treat the question of biometric liveness?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is becoming an increasingly important issue. I mean, as you mentioned when you were at Money 2020, if this is when face recognition is backing mission critical systems like banking, anytime there's a big transaction on the other end, you want to make sure that they're robust to hacking attacks, both generative adversarial network attacks, which we can talk about, and which we have a keen interest in, and also spoof attacks, just using things like masks and screens to spoof identity. We've taken an approach to it that has been both sort of looking at the different at some of the different technologies and sensors that we can use to create a robust solution there. We have both 2D and 3D solutions, and there's obviously a whole range of variables that go into making sure that liveness is robust. But interestingly, a guy that was looking at he did his postdoc on searching for exoplanets, is the guy that leads our anti-spoofing attack. He was doing that work with NASA and MIT, and so we think we have a pretty robust solution already, but always looking to improve it.
Yeah, liveness becomes a pretty trackable problem when you're used to finding exoplanets.
It's true.
Yeah. Yeah, those are big guns.
Just what Doug said there, I think that one thing I'd say, we're a software company, but liveness is a hardware software challenge. It's a systems level challenge.
Yeah. And
so our goal is to be as intelligent and informed about the different sensor technologies, things like hyperspectral imaging, depth sensing, and so forth, as we can be, so that we can point our partners and customers in the right direction. But meanwhile, there's some pretty cool things we can do from a pure software perspective that AI gives us an advantage on, and will continue to be an area of research for us.
Face biometrics in particular stands out as a modality because it presents an entirely frictionless end user experience. Just even personally speaking from experience, I upgraded my iPhone and now I have Face ID as opposed to Touch ID, and I just prefer it so much more because it's just so much better, easier. Right? It's so much better. It's so much faster.
That's that.
Yeah.
Especially being in Canada, it's colder here a lot of the months. I don't have to take off my mittens to open my phone, all that stuff. So the demand for biometrics across vertical markets is growing, and the ease of implementation is becoming the major differentiator. What are major challenges in actually deploying face biometrics?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one is making sure that you start with accurate models. We obviously prefer, and not just because of our ranking there, but we think NIST is a great independent arbiter of accuracy there, and we'll beat that drum even if we're not at the top of the rank, because it's important to have that independent validation there. But what's important is that accuracy can't just be in those lab settings. So if you're a customer or your partner, you have to think really pretty closely about what your use case is, and making sure you think about how you're going to handle different lighting conditions, different poses. Is the camera angle coming from the top? Is it coming from the bottom? And at what angle of incidence are your customers or the end users of the system likely to be wearing hats and glasses, and how does that impact the accuracy of the system? So, and then furthermore, making sure that you choose and that you test, because even NIST is focused on who their end customers are, which are primarily their federal government customers. But we have where we've actually seen a sort of a pretty big difference in algorithmic performance has been when you take it to the field. And so we always very confidently tell our partners, we make it very, very easy for them to test and evaluate the software and the algorithms, and then pair them with our team to make sure any questions get answered. So it's still I think early days for the technology. I like Jeff Bezos. I used to work at Amazon, and I always like it's still day one, and it's always day one. And if we keep that attitude, where it'll keep us hustling to make sure that we improve those experiences and think about all the different use cases. And then one other thing is just thinking about, and I think it's important for companies to think about not just algorithmic bias from the sense of a singular variable like age or gender or ethnicity, but to think about the intersection of those three things. One thing that we've tried to pioneer here is intersectional testing across age, gender, and ethnicity. And I think the kind of the results on NIST and the fervor with which our team goes after, they kind of speak for themselves.
This is Joey. I'd throw in one additional thing, which is beyond the algorithmic performance, beyond the environment, human factors, user interface, clear messaging. All of these things are really important. And on one side, there's the privacy side of this. So to the extent possible, when it's the right application, opt-in, consent-driven use cases where the privacy policy is clearly articulated is going to make people feel comfortable with it. They're going to understand what's going on with their data and what's not going on with their data. Obviously, there's environments that are security focused, like hospitals or airports, secure facilities, where there's going to be a different type of messaging, but we think it's critical as well. But there's also like really basic human factors things. And one of the stories that always comes to mind, at Tassent, where I was previously, we partnered with a company called Human Recognition Systems in the UK to deliver some really great capabilities to London Gatwick Airport. And when we were doing some initial rollout of the system, there were these e-gates, and they had an LCD screen and a barcode reader, and it said, place barcode face down. And Doug's laughing because he's heard this story. But, we had several people walk up and put their face on the barcode scanner because it said face down. And like, first of all, it's so horrible that this happened, and it's so comical that it happened, but that these people thought that an airport would be so awful as to ask them to put their face on like a platen that somebody else had just put their face on. But it's just, messaging matters and simplicity of messaging, and people don't read instructions, or when they do, they can misunderstand them. So how do we make it as simple as possible? And that's a big part of success in rolling out biometric identity in general.
Yeah. And I mean, education is important. And to be fair to those folks, when you're at the airport, you really are subjects. It's like you're a prisoner. Like you have to take off your shoes, standing machines with your arms up. It's all like, new. Depending on
Yeah. Right. They were just trying to comply, as you said, with what they were being told to do. Unfortunately, they were being told to put their face on a piece of glass.
Yeah. I think we're going to hopefully come to a point in the next several years where that kind of experience will be a total thing of the past, and you'll just breeze through the airport like there's. I mean, that's my hope, and we're already obviously working on those use cases. So
I totally agree. I mean, if you look at over the last couple of years, on-the-move biometrics have become viable.
Yeah.
If you look at what the DHS rally as an example, and what multiple vendors, I'm proud to say, Tassent performed awesome,
so incredibly well there.
On-the-move face recognition is really viable. And so these kind of seamless experiences that Doug mentioned, that's coming. Actually, it's here in many cases already, but it's, I think, coming in a broad scale. So,
and I think the customer acceptance, that was the thing that was so incredible about the rally. When I was sort of reading some of the reports there, is that the customer acceptance of face recognition in that environment, maybe because it's such a hellacious experience, is proof.
Yeah, I mean, 98% customer satisfaction is like, that's Apple numbers.
Yeah, right. It's incredible. So I think we're close there, and and thankfully, I think one of the points that Joey brought up earlier, which is that you can use with face recognition, you don't really need to use specialized hardware, especially with some of the more kind of performant algorithms out there. You can use some basic camera streams. So the technology becomes less invasive as it progresses. So I think those are huge advances.
Paravision's platform powers mission-critical applications from large enterprises and systems integrators who need face recognition that is accurate in challenging scenarios, provides superior levels of security, real-time performance, and can be deployed in any environment. Listeners of the ID Talk podcast know identity is everything and everywhere. Paravision's versatile biometrics platform brings secure face recognition with world-class accuracy to video analytics, access control, ID verification, payments applications, and more. Learn more about how Paravision can empower your mission-critical applications with best-in-class identity technology by visiting paravision.ai. Now, back to the podcast.
So just to pivot over, I'd really like to talk to you about a recent controversy in the ongoing facial recognition sort of panic that we're seeing in mainstream media. The UK Home Office was recently revealed to have unknowingly deployed face recognition with an ethnic bias. So, Doug, I knew you were speaking about this before. How does something like this happen, and what are the best practices to ensure face biometrics treat all users and subjects equally?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Actually, I think it's kind of the question that faces the industry. And I think that if I'm recalling, and I might not be, so apologies here, Susan, if I'm not, but I think the UK Home Office actually may have known about some of the performance shortcomings, but had determined that it was kind of good enough. And that's the real question: is what is good enough, and how do they determine it? And our perspective is that we think standards bodies like NIST and their face recognition vendor tests are incredibly important. And we're specifically excited for those the listeners that don't know that there's an upcoming report on face recognition algorithmic bias that's coming out soon that we're eager to see, because we've done a lot of work in this arena. So, and I also think it's important to, I was having this conversation with somebody at a dinner party the other night. Computers are going to be judged much more harshly than humans are, and we just need to recognize that the amount of algorithmic bias that is in some of these algorithms is now at the point where it's far less biased than most humans are in their daily lives. And face recognition is actually now proven to be superior to human recognition in most use cases as well. So that being said, those models and algorithms are always going to be judged more harshly than humans, and they should be. So I think at the end of the day, this is going to be an ongoing discussion, and I think it's great to have bodies like NIST that are going to help lead that discussion, and other industry peers of ours who together I think are going to drive this issue out. And we're already seeing huge advancements there.
Yeah, and one of the things that this raises is when you look at UK Home Office as an example, where were they getting their information from? How did they determine that it was good enough, right? And so from a vendor that wasn't best of breed, but sort of wanted to normalize their performance, so they were like, okay, look, this is as good as you can expect because we're this brand. The reality is, again, NIST reports will help guide us there, and internal research will help us as well. Certain algorithms will perform very well on certain populations, and other algorithms perform well across a wide variety of populations. And one of the reasons I joined Paravision was not just the technology and the team, but there's also this core belief that rooting out algorithmic bias is critical. And so sort of seeing the sophisticated approach that we've taken, both in the diversity of the data sets and then the specific machine learning technology that we deployed, gives me a lot of optimism that we can help lead the way. There will be multiple other parties. I mean, we're encouraged to see what the rest of the industry is doing as well, but we're glad to be a part of it.
So how do you think that, or how can the face biometric vendors work in partnership to ensure the ethical use of this powerful technology while also ensuring we can benefit from its promise?
Yeah, I've been hugely encouraged by the pretty consistent calls from industry for balanced legislation here. So, and I think everybody's aligned on this. Sort of the important thing is to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think we've seen a lot of mainstream media that, because of the way those industries work, they're sort of prone and encouraged to throw up sensationalist headlines to drive clicks. But there are incredibly important and valid uses of face recognition, and I think that the current discussions that are happening at a national level, at least in the U.S. and at a state level, are encouraging. And I think it's also important to note that face recognition and how it's implemented in the United States and Western Europe and in other sort of democratic countries is going to be very different than how it is pursued in countries like China and Russia, where those privacy rights aren't as inherent. So I think it's important to continue the conversation and to end up at a balanced legislation that still allows the people that protect our communities to be able to use 20th century or 21st century technology,
and the people that deliver great customer experiences.
Yeah.
Right. So there's the safety and security side, but there's also the efficiency and personalization, all those things that are going to be in demand. I think one thing I'd say from a product side that kind of maps to the policy side, we'll keep coming back to several themes, and these are not unique to Paravision. This is a place where we can really partner with industry. The themes of accuracy, inclusion, security, convenience. How do we deliver excellent performance across all of these?
Amen.
Right. So on one side, there's a policy discussion that has to go on. But on the other side, we can strive to deliver excellent performance that backs up whatever the policy decision ends up being.
You touched on, talking about in terms of the controversy around facial recognition, just go back to that with human rights violations in China and calls for face-based surveillance bans stateside. How big of a threat does the controversy around facial recognition pose to the industry?
We think this is largely an issue of mindset. We don't really think of that controversy as a threat. We think it's an important sort of call to have a good informed dialogue about the technology and its benefits and challenges, and what is acceptable, and so I think that's where we take it, and we're encouraged by the dialogue, and we're encouraged by the controversy, because quite frankly, this should be a huge discussion. There are ways, like most technologies, when they're new, there are incredible ways to misuse those technologies, and but with that, you also have a lot of potential benefit, and so yeah, we think of it less of a threat to the industry, and more just being encouraged by the dialogue that's happening.
It also forces us to up our game in terms of the messaging, right? Yeah. So we have to be crystal clear with the public about what the technology is, how it works, where it's being used, how to use it. So some of the messaging communications things I mentioned before play into that. So again, it's not really a threat. It's really more of just it's time to put on, our adult suits here and be sophisticated in terms of how we deal with a very challenging topic.
So moving on to where Paravision is and coming to the end of this year, what have been some company highlights, and what can we expect next from Paravision?
Well, Susan, as we talked about sort of before, we're a young company, being an enterprise and offering these tools. We're about kind of 2 years old and growing incredibly fast. So while we've hit some huge technical milestones that have been pretty public, from our sort of ranking on NIST, and had some huge customer wins, we're actually, and I am particularly most proud of the team we're building. So it's such an incredibly diverse group. Great to have Joey here on the team and his background in biometrics, and he and I actually were in the same dorm in college 20 years ago, which is sort of funny that we're working together now a couple decades later. But also folks like, we have a business development representative who has a PhD in genetics, and is just sort of really interested in pursuing starting a company someday and wants to learn about sales, and we'll happily take her on board because she's brilliant. I mentioned some of the folks on our deep learning team that have experience that goes well beyond just sort of computer vision and face recognition. Actually, interestingly, of all the researchers on our deep learning team, we only really have one that has a specialty in face recognition. And so that to me means we built like an incredibly balanced team, and one that can pursue broader computer vision. And then also just a really diverse group of minds. And so that's what's been, I think those are the highlights for me. We'll have some pretty interesting technical announcements, new product lines that we'll be announcing towards the end of the year as well. And as we move from really being known from face recognition to being known for broader mission critical computer vision.
Having seen companies built from the ground up before, I can't echo strongly enough what Doug was saying about the people. I mean, that's the difference between a great company and one that's not going to be as great. The technology is outstanding, but with the awesome people, we have an opportunity to do something really special. In terms of the product, and to build on some of the things that Doug mentioned, leveraging that machine learning infrastructure that we talked about, that highly efficient machine learning infrastructure to deliver a broader range of CP tools. And in particular, one of the things that you could expect in the next few months from us is activity recognition. Mm-hmm. It's a great complement to face recognition. It uses the same deep learning infrastructure we have, And in our initial tests, it's testing extremely well internally. So we're excited to bring that to market and show more tools that our partners can use. We're also planning to bring our capabilities to a wider range of platforms, both in the back end and, as Doug mentioned previously, at the edge. So the goal is just more broadly to help our partners develop and deploy in a wider range of use cases.
I'm going to put one more thing in there because I'm told I use this word too often to describe other humans, but I think it's true in this case, and I think the word I would use to describe almost to a person, the team that we have is lovely. Like they're just a bunch of, it is an absolute joy to come into work every day and work with a set of really lovely and intelligent human beings. And so that to me is always going to be the mark. As long as we keep hiring for that, we're going to do incredibly well. And so I'm sorry to sort of interject that, but I think first of all, it's incredibly important for people to use the word lovely because
I'm thinking about how we can kind of put into our company branding.
The Stewart's last name is Lieblich, which is actually German for lovely. So
he's truly lovely.
He's truly lovely. So
my middle name is Lovely,
and
that's different.
That's different. That's an entirely different conversation. But anyway, sorry to throw that in.
No, I think it's lovely. So
Thank you.
Just to wrap up here, this conversation, how can listeners get in contact with you to learn more about Paravision and Face Biometrics?
Well, people should definitely check out our website at paravision.ai, which is PARA vision.ai, or you can always reach out to sales at paravision.ai, or reach out to us via any social media channels.
LinkedIn, especially, our Snapchat game is not big, and probably TikTok's not coming anytime soon.
You guys aren't on the TikTok game yet?
No,
you gotta get there.
Probably gonna pass on
for now.
You're only 2 years old. That's like a third year, fourth year sort of thing.
There you go. Yeah, priorities.
Well, I'm looking forward to more lovely conversations with you as you move forward. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. This was lovely.
Thanks, Susan. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Susan.
And so marks the end of this episode of the ID Talk podcast. To learn more about the topics discussed, be sure to visit paravision.ai. The conversation on face recognition continues at FindBiometrics.com, where our editorial team is leading the discourse with insightful featured articles and focused daily news. Thank you to this week's interviewer, Susan Stover, and her guests, Doug Aley and Joey Pritikin. Thank you once again to Legumrad for the use of the ID Talk theme music. Until next time, I'm Peter Counter. Thank you for listening.